Welcome to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into C2C. Welcome to the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, and tonight we are going to be reviewing some C2C teams that the listeners sent in. Very excited to do that, but you know I can't do it by myself, so I'm happy to bring on Aaron Wilcox and Andy Starr. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Yes, we are excited for this podcast, breaking down some rosters, and we have a very fantastic co-host, a guest joining us here tonight as well, besides, the usual crew of myself, John and Andy.
Absolutely. You know what? I would normally we'd sit here and talk about Andy's weather and all that kind of stuff, but I'm too excited. We got to bring on technically our first official guest since we went to the three-man crew, and that is our very good friend Josh Chevalier at CFF Guys on Twitter. One of my favorite people in the world, at least in the Dynasty space, but probably in the world, and from my hometown. So it makes it just that much better. Josh, how are you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. Wish I was down with you, hanging out near the beach over there in Tampa.
Yeah, we were at the beach last weekend, and that was very nice. Although you're in Texas, right? So
yeah,
we just lost Andy for a second, but I think it's probably pretty damn hot there as well. But I'll tell you what, we're up into like the hundreds right now, so it's it's not
dude,
great.
That's cooking for. If those that don't know, like Tampa's like 90, 92 degrees.
Yeah.
It's like pretty. I mean, it's humid.
No, it was 90.
Hundreds is crazy.
Well, 100 might be exact. It was like 96 the other day, but it was still
that's
pretty
cooking. Yeah,
yeah,
and that
absolutely.
Florida sun, that's cooking.
Absolutely. But we are not here to talk about the weather. In fact, we probably are going to go long as it is, so we should probably go ahead and dive in. But the reason why we brought our good friend Josh on is because we're going to be doing C2C reviews, and obviously along with our normal Devy talk and everything, C2C brings that whole other dynamic of CFF. And who better to bring on for CFF purposes than CFF Guys on Twitter? And so we had to do it. No, but he's one of the people that I turn to. I always ask. It's probably one of the biggest weaknesses I have, at least as an analyst or whatever, is CFF, the CFF part of C2C. Andy hates freshmen. I'm getting to the point where I'm better at that. I'm getting better at that at the very least. But I feel like this is my weakness. Andy has all the G6 and all the FCS players that he does research on, so he knows all these transfers. Aaron just does a little bit of everything, so he seems to be pretty well versed on that kind of stuff. But like I said, one of my weaknesses for sure. So I wanted to bring on someone who actually knew what they were talking about. But Josh, I wanted to ask you, I was talking to Aaron and Andy, like right as he jumped on before you got on. Does this feel like a down year for CFF purposes? Obviously you're in the full CFF streets, but obviously leaning towards C2C, but even in your best ball, your CFF best ball, all that kind of stuff, does it feel kind of like a down year, or at the very least like an ambiguous year where we don't really know who's going to break out or how it's going to happen? We just might know, okay, it's probably going to be this offense, but it could be this guy, it could be that guy, and we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things I think are happening this year. One, we're in like year 3 or 4 of the transfer portal. And that's just brought in a totally different side of things. We're finally getting out of the COVID years. So we don't have like 27-year-olds playing college football, which is great. But I think one of the things the transfer portal has done is democratized a little bit the talent across the board. So at certain positions, you see more depth. So quarterback, man, there's like so many quarterbacks that you can pick up in CFF, and they'll be relevant. Wide receiver, feels like a total crapshoot. Like kind of like you're saying, like a little bit of a reset year where there's a lot of guys that are gone. And so you don't really know who's going to pop up as that wide receiver one at some key places. And then running back, everyone's rushing to go get running back. So they feel like there's like maybe 20 or 30 that are relevant, but they're all going in the first 5 rounds. So then it's like the wild, wild west. So I think you're really hitting it well and seeing it well that like this is a little bit of a reset year at pretty much every position but quarterback.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Aaron had mentioned that. He was like, I don't know, quarterback seems to be pretty good. I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. I haven't really dove into the actual CFF quarterbacks as much, but that there does seem to be more. There's less Devy viable QBs, but there's more CFF viable QBs. So I guess that's a good thing for C2C. Maybe not necessarily Devy, but enough about that. Why don't we go ahead and dive into our first team? Aaron, you made the sheet. It's a little wonky, so why don't you run us through the first team, and then we can dive right in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, just for the listeners out there, we are going to be breaking down the campus or the college side of these college rosters. So, each of these teams also has an NFL roster to it and components as well. We don't know anything about that side, if they're kind of stacked on that side or rebuilding, whatever the case is. We're going to focus on the college side, and I'm going to take you through our first submission here. Thomas Peterson, a fellow Minnesota guy, actually. He submitted his roster, and I'm going to go through the highlights of the roster, starting with the quarterback position, and then kind of just go down through running backs, wide receivers, tight ends quick, just so we can get a good idea of kind of the meat and potatoes, the main guys on that roster. And if we want to shout out like maybe some sleepers on that roster, and then potentially even like what we should plan for with that roster. Like, is it a rebuilding year? Is it let's go and try to compete for a CFF championship? Is it just focus on Devy guys? Whatever we think, we'll give out that advice as well for Thomas. But starting at the quarterback position, he's got a pretty good squad with Julian Sand. He's got Kevin Jennings, Byron Brown. So a couple viable guys there for starters at the quarterback position. Going to the running back position, a little bit tougher pickings there. Jaden Thomas, I think he'll have another good year there at UNLV. And then he's got Riscano, who could step into a lead role there at Arizona. But then going to the wide receivers, some really nice young guys there with Cam Coleman, Andrew Marsh, Dallas Wilson, and Wyatt Young, now transferring over following his coach and quarterback to Oklahoma State. And then the tight ends, they just need a lot of work there, right? So not a lot of notable names there, in my opinion. Yeah, what do you guys think with this roster? Like, maybe we'll start with, if Josh has thoughts on it, is like more the CFF authority here tonight, and just overall thoughts on this roster's ability to maybe compete this year, or what kind of direction they might want to go in, considering that this is seemingly a pre-supplemental roster. So Thomas has not added in his supplemental draft and players quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before. I feel like right now the hardest position to nail is wide receiver. And I mean, you got a guy here who's got Wyatt Young, Cam Coleman, 2 guys that are going in the first like 3 or 4 rounds of CFF drafts right now. That's a pretty good starting point on a CFF side of things. And then quarterback wise, I mean, he's got Byron Brown, who crushed it at USF. It remains to be seen what he can do in the SEC. But if he can start off hot, then you got Kevin Jennings there. He's got Julian Sand, who's got a pretty nice floor. So I don't know. This is a tough one. I think he's going to have to figure out in the first couple of weeks of his season whether he thinks he can compete or not. And if he can, then I think you can probably go all in there. But if you just think that there's too much to overcome here, then I would start to trade off some of my assets like Byron Brown, who might look good in the non-conference part of the schedule. But once he gets into SEC, he's probably going to drop off. Auburn's got a pretty tough schedule this year. So you could trade off that CFF asset for either future draft picks or maybe something on the NFL side. But yeah, overall, wide receiver is definitely the strongest point on this team, both from a Devy or C2C side and a CFF side. But I think probably running back, he's going to have to get some some in the supplemental, and then probably needs one or two other quarterbacks like you can add in there that are CFF quarterbacks specifically.
Yeah, I agree 100% that the wide receivers are the strength of this team. With Cam Coleman, even Andrew Marsh being who we think is probably going to be the leading receiver at Michigan. I know that that's not necessarily a CFF favorable position, but as far as like, at this point, like Devy value even, that's somebody that you're going to want to have on your team. I don't know that this team can compete based on the status of the running backs right now and the tight ends. But it is CFF. So if you play your cards right in the supplemental draft, I think any team could compete if that's the way you want to take the team. He's definitely going to have to address tight ends. I think right now he's got all of his eggs in Jelani Thurman, breaking out at UNC, which I don't think that's going to happen. Certainly not something I'm projecting. And then the running backs, yeah, I mean, you could say Jaden Thomas is a solid CFF guy, but beyond that, like, there's no depth. Malik Sherrod, he had a couple really big weeks last year. Maybe he can be a little bit more consistent there at Boise State. And Aiden Laffrey, like a lot of these guys too, pre-supplemental, whether or not this is like a draft to fill league, there's a lot of guys on this team that I would just straight up drop, especially some of these wide receivers. I think Jamie French moving to Michigan after what happened at Texas, I'm not necessarily, expecting him to break out at Michigan. There's a lot of like Andy Jean. I'm not even certain. I think he played for Arkansas last year. Now he's transferring to North Texas. I don't know much about him. Some of these guys, I just feel like you have better options even 20, 30 rounds into a supplemental draft that you could go for. But, like I said, if you focus on CFF in a supplemental draft, any team could potentially compete. But this team, I think, has a lot of work to do. But I do really love the wide receivers. Even Dallas Wilson, who we didn't even mention yet, who he also has on this team.
Yeah, I'm basically on board with what you guys were saying, but I was maybe thinking of a more aggressive approach. And I guess obviously it depends on your league and everything. But I was really kind of, like both of you said, I don't think that they're necessarily. I mean, anything can happen. I've seen Aaron especially turn around a team that I thought was going to be god awful in the C2C league, and then go grab a bunch of CFF options, and next thing you know, he's competing in a year. That doesn't necessarily help your NFL squad, but you can definitely go and win a championship or at least compete on that side. So anything is possible, being that we're pre-supplemental here. But just looking at some of the pieces and saying, the running backs aren't there, you're really going to have to hit. And can we even say that like that you're going to get a bunch of running backs in your supplemental and all of a sudden you're going to be amazing? I don't know that we can do that. So, but I'm looking at the pieces like your Byron Brown and your Kevin Jennings and even your Julian Sain and players like, could you try to trade some of these like more CFF pieces? Now, obviously, Julian Sain is not necessarily just that, but could you try to trade some of these more CFF pieces and like get more supplemental picks right now, and then go into your strengths for like maybe next year or whenever? Now you have Cam Coleman, you have, and I would even be looking to trade Dallas Wilson. I'm kind of all out at this point. He's had a couple too many injuries, hasn't been able to prove himself, isn't in really a pretty crowded room anyway. But Wyatt Young is another player that you could probably get a ton for right now, especially in C2C. But he's even getting Devy love, so you might be able to get something on the NFL side for him. So I'm just wondering if you're proactive about it and you really go, hey, you're competing this year, I'm not. Can you go get some extra supplemental pieces and really go all in on next year? Because next year, this time, Byron Brown's going to get you absolutely nothing. And, if you wait too long and he is in that SEC window, like Josh was saying, you've screwed yourself at that point. You've completely wasted all the value that you could have gotten. And so I don't want to be, and I don't want to be like Debbie Downer and be like, hey, you got no shot. But I feel like it's a long shot here for you to truly compete, unless you go that full CFF route, which is probably definitely not my way of doing things. So I would lean towards that. Sell these pieces before your supplemental. Try to get as much value as possible. And that doesn't always mean just picks. Try to get players that you believe in as well. I think we've all been big proponents of, supplemental picks suck. And so don't just go all in on picks, because picks are not fantastic. And we've seen supplemental six that end up being more important than supplemental seconds. So I wouldn't really freak out too much about the picks, but try to get players, whether it's helping your NFL side or players for the future that you truly believe in.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful too to know from Tom. Like, I wish we could ask some questions like, hey, who's out on your waiver wire? Like, what was your waiver wire even like during the season? Because some only allow you to pick up like every 4 weeks, or they allow you to pick up every week, right? Or a certain number of transactions. If this is something where you have guys like Will Henderson or Jamari McClure, some of these G6 guys that went off later in the year, Ja'Cory Lewis, and you just couldn't pick them up during the playoffs or whatever, then there's a chance to compete. There's a lot of G6 running backs this year that I think are going to be supplemental picks, either coming up from the FCS to the G6 level, or just guys that didn't do great last year, but they have a lot more favorable opportunities this year. So guys like Austin Dendy kind of hit near the end of the year last year, Ja'Cory Lewis, Jamari McClure, who I talked about, Will Henderson, Telly Johnson, Roderick Robinson just dropped down from Georgia UAB. He's looking really good in spring camp. Rodney Nelson from FCS, CJ Miller going to Toledo. I mean, that's just a few of them. Duncan Bruns taking over for Sia Bangura. So if you can study these G6 guys and figure out a game plan at running back, I think you can stack it up. But the problem is there's just a lot of holes on this roster that you got to fill. But you would have to do it through the G6. So you're really committing to going after the CFF side, and you're probably not going to get a lot of C2C value on the NFL side from those picks. So I guess there's the yin and the yang of that strategy.
I like it. Thanks for you guys' thoughts on that. And next up, we do have, unless there's any other final thoughts here, jump in. We can go over to the next roster that we'll break down, and that's for Husker 1. And I'm going to ask you guys, similarly, I'm going to go over the roster here so everybody listening has an idea, but I'm going to ask you guys for your favorite part of Husker 1's team, and then your biggest wish for Husker 1 as a manager. So kind of biggest thing that you'd either recommend or kind of wish that their squad had or could acquire. I think there was a little bit of context here with this team being halfway through, or at least, partially through their supplemental already. So I don't know how deep in or how many rounds are left in this supplemental, but we've seen, some freshmen enter now this team and some supplemental picks. So anyways, without further ado, Husker 1's roster, starting off with Trinidad Chambliss at QB, Demont Williams, Alhado, Hammond, Velkamp, so some capable starters in depth there. Then we'll go to the running back position with Bo Jackson, Ohio State running back, some people's RB1 right now. Cam Cook, who had a strong year, but transferring up, from G6, now a little bit more challenging competition again for him, but Nate Frazier at Georgia, Mekhi Hughes transferring down from Oregon. Jaden Thomas, we already talked about him with Tom's roster. Jakarian Turner, who also should be assuming a pretty big role again at Pitt. And then the wide receivers, which are pretty fun on this team, with Messer, who's just, wide receiver 1 type of candidate in CFF leagues. And then Jeremiah Smith, we all know that he is just the belle of the ball. He is the darling of the Devy and also in the CFF sphere as well. Then you got Amari Thomas for Houston, Amarian Miller and Reed Harris for Arizona State, and then at the tight end position you got Vonum from Iowa, who, on this podcast, Devotional guys here, we really like him and his upside for both fantasy production and eventual NFL potential. And then even Bowman as a true freshman at USC, I think that's kind of a fun, like, future pick. I don't know what Lincoln Riley's going to do there, utilizing the tight end and especially like playing him right away. So you might need another tight end option there. But what do you guys think? Maybe we'll go with Josh again leading off, but maybe do you have a favorite part of the team and then a biggest wish for Husker 1?
Well, I know Husker 1 pretty well, so no bad things to say about this team. I mean, look, you talked about his receivers are amazing. Running backs are really good. QB, tight end even. I mean, Vaname, I'm with you guys. I'm glad you guys are on him because I like him too quite a bit. So to me, a guy like this, like you can compete on the CFF side, and I would say, man, take your shots on some like C2C Devy assets. So I'd love to hear y'all's ideas of who he could get really from that side of things to really strengthen things, going forward. Guys that could be CFF and Devy assets at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. Like, this team is ready to go. Like, this is a CFF playoff team as it stands right now. The quarterbacks, he's got the Caden Veldkamp, Easton Messer stack, which is always nice to have. They're another year under their belt, so you probably can expect that to be even more dynamic. Jeremiah Smith, you can't really say anything. I'll answer your question too. My favorite part of this team is probably the quarterbacks, and for CFF reasons, between Chambliss, Damon Williams, Veldkamp, even Mike Alejado. This team's gonna, they're gonna consistently be putting up just 60+ points just from their QB position, which is great to have. It's something that he's not gonna have to worry about. Least favorite, it's hard to say. I mean, I actually feel like I would want some more Devy. And it's weird saying this because he has Jeremiah Smith, but like more Devy, depth in the wide receivers, because beyond that, there's not really, Reed Harris and Omarion Miller are kind of middle tier guys that I could see taking a big step forward in 2026. And Chase Sowell, if he has a resurgence, moving to Penn State, there's possibilities there. But I would really like to see beef up the Devy strength of the wide receivers. But as far as everything else, like Vonami and Brett Norfleet, even the tight ends are ready to go. Assuming that there's going to be waivers in this league, I think you just do a couple tinker ads here and there, and this is a playoff team, potentially like a top 2 seed going in. I really feel like not knowing how the league scoring works or anything else, just looking at the team without any context, I feel pretty confident saying like they're going to be competing.
Yeah, I was gonna say this one got thrown in last into the sheet, I believe. But the second I saw it, and maybe it's because he's in the middle of his supplemental, but I felt like this one was the most ready to compete of all of the ones that we're going to talk about tonight. Maybe I'm wrong, and we'll get into the rest of the teams. But it just seems like it's pretty even overall. And congratulations, you actually have good tight ends. How many people can actually say that? And we do. I mean, DJ Boname is my tight end, or Debbie Beth's tight end 1. Mark Bowman was at least the second best tight end in Fresh Beth. So I mean, they're sitting pretty with their tight ends. I guess I would love that. They have some really quality wide receivers. I wanted to ask Josh how he feels about Amari Thomas, because I feel like I mentioned him as kind of like a sleeper or whatever that Debbie Beth kind of likes, and Aaron was kind of giving me a side eye the other day when I mentioned Amari Thomas. He's like, really? So I'm kind of wondering how you're feeling about him, because I feel like that's kind of like an underrated CFF/Debbie option.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, from the CFF side of things, I mean, he's a top 5 wide receiver, pretty much
Sure.
consensus right now. NFL side, I mean, I think it's tough. I mean, these type of wide receivers, I can't even remember what his metrics are, but it feels like he's like 6 foot, 195. Like, those types are just tougher for me to like figure out. of what their NFL potential is or Devy potential is. So
Sure.
he's not in a system that's like great at producing NFL guys. Just quite frankly, like nothing in the Slade Nagel. I mean, guys that like left there maybe went on and did stuff, and but so I think it's tougher for me to predict him at the next level. But in college football, Amari Thomas is all. I mean, to go from UAB to Houston to do what he's doing, I mean, he's always been an athlete for sure. How that translates to the next level. He's not an SEC guy though. So what is Beth doing here?
Hey, we're broadening horizons and everything, so we're I will say I don't fall in love with too many Big 12 wide receivers or players in general, but especially nowadays, it feels like it's kind of getting worse and worse as we go along. But I don't know, he's just kind of standing out. He's not some stud in Debbie Beth or anything, but he's kind of in that like Ricky Pearsall range where like I always said there's something about Ricky Pearsall and Aaron, especially back in the day, always gave me a bunch of grief about that. Like, why are you talking about Ricky Pearsall? I'm like, I don't know, there's just something about him. And then he goes and gets drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, and I'm like, see what happened now. I mean, he got shot and he's been hurt basically his entire career, so I don't even know if it was a good call. But that's just kind of the range that he's in, and I kind of feel about it. But getting back to Huskers team here, I feel like, once again, I feel like he has the most balanced team. Jakarian Turner is a sophomore that we probably don't even talk about enough. But when you start talking about Bo Jackson and then players like Nate Frazier and whoever else, as far as like being able to. I'm not a fan of Frazier as far as a Devy player, but for CFF purposes or college purposes, I'm fine with them. If I could make one recommendation for this team, and I'm sure Andy will back me up on this one, Mekhi Hughes is getting steam again after transferring, back to Houston or wherever the hell he went. Just get him off your team. Like, please just get him off your team. Let someone else fall on that dagger. And even if he's good this year, just get him off your team. You don't need him. You can get something else for him. And honestly, I'd probably do the same thing with Cam Cook. I feel like Cam Cook is this year's Mekhi Hughes. With transferring up, he has a lot of steam, and then he goes up to the P4, and he's just not there. 6.8% big time run rate just doesn't do it for me, and that's at a low level of competition. So what happens when you actually hit that high level? Well, we already found out it's called Mekhi Hughes, and you don't play. That's what happens. So love your QBs. Your running backs are solid. I wouldn't say they're amazing, but they're definitely solid. And then obviously the wide receivers there, Reed Harris, Amarian Miller, even Jordan Shipp doesn't probably get enough love. But you have a lot of good pieces. Like I said, I think this team's ready to compete. And I don't know how many rounds you have left, but it maybe mix in some CFF there and then just really go all in.
Yeah, one quick CFF note here. Pofel Ashlock is a guy that's going pretty high right now. Get Audric Harris if you also have Pofel Ashlock. He's another wide receiver slot guy there at Hawaii. He was high school teammates with Micah Alejado, and also just get him. Just trust me on that one.
Ashlock.
We'll just leave it at that. I can't say why, but go ahead.
Ashlock is a guy who's been overrated the entire time. I remember, was it week 1 of 3 years ago? Everyone and their mother went and spent their entire auction, budget on him, and then he did absolutely nothing. And if that isn't the perfect example of why you don't go all in on week 1 waivers, I think it is. But it seems like he's always just been overrated for whatever reason, and maybe it's just there's no one better there or whatever else, but he seems to get passed by every year, and so maybe this is just another example of that.
Yeah.
What do you think, Aaron?
Absolutely. And that Hawaii team, I mean, the passing game should take a step forward, right? Because Alejado was banged up last year. Is that correct, Josh? He should.
Ankle injury, first game of the year.
Yeah. So, I mean, I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and try to defend Pofele Ashlock, who, like you guys said, has kind of disappointed some through the past. But I will say for guys like Mackay Hughes, from a CFF standpoint, I mean, like the guy's been fine before. If he gets volume, like it's a very fantasy friendly type of system there. But like you said, for Devy purposes, and you have to separate from like past podcasts, right? We've kind of ripped on Mackay Hughes as far as like a player goes for a legit NFL type of prospect. But for CFF, I mean, I get it. If you really believe in him, he could probably give you some points. At the end of the day, good squad here. I liked to see kind of the balance between all the positions there. So you could certainly grab another tight end too late in the draft if you have some room. Just because you don't know if Mark Bowman as a freshman again is going to play much for you. And I don't really trust Houston Thomas, like transferring up in competition, like if that's going to work out. I don't know what to expect out of Norfleet, but do you have any opinions on Norfleet there, Josh, by the way? I have not looked into him this season.
I mean, I've always liked him as like a more of like a C2C Devy asset than even in college, but he'll be serviceable, but I don't think you're going to be starting him. If you're starting him, you're not a playoff team. We'll just put it that way.
Fair enough. And he has other tight end starters. So we'll get into the next team here. And so scrolling down to it, 50 Shades of Alps team. We'll go through the quarterbacks and all the other positions here. So right away, Drew Mestamaker, a guy who actually did perform really well if you were able to grab him fairly early on last offseason, whether it was in drafts or on the waivers. You got Noah Fafita there. I assume Byron Brown. There's just abbreviations with the screenshot that's been provided, but Hauser as well for potential CFF option. He's on Longstreet, maybe the heir apparent there at LSU. Who knows? Darian Mensah, podcast favorite here at the Devy Devotional, going to Miami. That should be a fun offense. And then let's go over to the running backs. Another roster with Cam Cook on it. LJ Martin, who is a guy I always like for CFF production. Should be another solid year out of him. Same with Mark Fletcher, kind of always underrated for his CFF contributions. Last season, he was solid. Nate Shepard, coming off a promising freshman season, should get a ton of volume this year. And then maybe I'll go Waymon Jordan, I assume, is the other running back there that I should highlight for sure at USC. If he's healthy, he'll probably contribute. But if not, King Miller time, right? It's King Miller season. That would be super fun as well. But he just has Waymon Jordan, it looks like. And then going to the wide receiver position, I mean, Bo Sparks, Marion Miller, and Dwyer as well, I suppose, at TCU. Like he's solid enough, but nothing really after that. So I think that is somewhere to target for this team. And then Terrence Carter and then Bentancur, I guess, for Clemson would be kind of a solid option as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. Do you guys think, is this team ready to compete, yay or nay? We could start with Josh again.
Yeah, I definitely. There are some holes and question marks. I mean, if it's a 6-point passing touchdown league, I think he's fine at quarterback. There's starters every week, and then there's spot starters, I think, on this team as well. I guess the big question would be wide receiver. I mean, again, you have Bo Sparks, which is a great CFF asset to have, but after that, and Dwyer potentially, if TCU can do that. Amari Miller if he hits, but there's just question marks. I would definitely say wide receiver is what I would target early here if you want to compete on the CFF side. And also, you need some more assets for sure for the NFL at the wide receiver position. And then the strength, I do like these running backs overall. I like them. Some of the starters might not. Some of the guys that are currently subs, I would probably put over. And Antoine Raymond, I like on the college side of things. Rutgers has a much more friendly schedule this year than normal. I've already talked about Roderick Robinson. I like him a lot this year at UAB. And then Waymon Jordan, you're right. If he hits, if he's healthy, and but man, both Waymon Jordan and King Miller are awesome, and I hope they're both healthy, and that's going to kill everybody's value for both of them.
And thank you for bringing up Raymond, because I don't think I mentioned Antoine Raymond, who should get a pretty big volume role at Rutgers next year. And you can even point to, like, you already mentioned Roderick Robinson. Looks like he's on this squad. You see Willis, maybe he'll get some volume, I think, at Kansas, I want to say.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, there's some options for sure.
Yeah, I kind of agree with everything you guys are saying. Like, I like the quarterbacks. We expect Mestamaker to hit somewhat there at Oklahoma State, following his coach, getting a lot of those pieces over there. The Big 12, yes, it's a step up. But I don't think it's that big of a step up from where they were in Sun Belt or American Athletic, whatever conference they were in last year. So I feel like it's going to work in the Big 12 offensively anyway, because Big 12 is obviously not known for their defense, so I'm not worried about that at all. And then obviously Byron Brown, that one might be a little bit more difficult, because going from USF to Auburn is going to be a little bit more of a culture shock. But he's got enough depth in the quarterback position with Mensa and even Retzlaff, who could certainly be something of a CFF player at Tulane this year, I believe. And then he's got some like you mentioned, Longstreet, some depth pieces there too. But the running backs really are the star of the show, from a Devy standpoint and a CFF standpoint. LJ Martin's going to score a lot of points. I think Bryson Donaldson's actually kind of sneaky good too. I know Rayshawn Luke kind of took the majority of the touches last year, but I actually kind of like Donaldson, and he's young. I think he's probably going to only improve from how he performed last year. So I actually think that there's a chance that he takes over as the RB1 for Fresno. And yeah, I mean, I won't harp on Waymon Jordan anymore. I know we all kind of feel the same about him. He's just got to stay healthy. And I'm with you on the wide receivers too. I mean, I had high hopes for Joseph Williams with Omarion Miller leaving Colorado, but Colorado just brought in so many guys in the transfer portal. It's such a cluster over there. I don't know if he's going to step out on top, or it's going to be one of the 5 guys that they brought in. And then tight end is if Betancer or Bettenker can take that next step that we're hoping for, then that might be a solid piece. And then Matt Lauder for Boise State, he always seems to pop up every now and again too with the game. So maybe there's something there, but I would say certainly the pass catchers are what you'd want to focus on. But whether or not this team can compete, I think they're very close. I don't think they have to add more than a handful of guys in a supplemental draft or waivers to certainly make it into the playoffs by the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you there. My question for everyone is Drew Mestamaker like the biggest sell of the offseason? Because I've seen, he's a top 3 QB in the class, for Devy purposes, for NFL purposes. And like, as soon as you start hearing that stuff from a guy who's never competed at a P4 level, I'm like, get this person off of my team right now and give me everything in return. Like, he already has Darian Mensah, but in a realistic scenario, if he didn't, do you think you could get Darian Mensah for Drew Mestamaker? Like, even if you had to add a little bit or whatever. And I would so much rather have Darian Mensah than Drew Mestamaker. I'm struggling to believe in Drew. 8.4 intended air yards and 4.68% big time throw rate at a lower level, at a G5 level, doesn't make me all of a sudden go, oh, you take a step up and you're amazing, but yet that's what people are kind of saying. Now, that being said, he brought his entire team with him and everything. I think he's going to be fine for CFF purposes, and he's going to be fine for sorry, I just hit my mic. He's going to be fine for 50 Shades team here. But I just wonder, that was just kind of like a question of mine, is he like the biggest sell of the offseason? Because it just seems like he's getting way too much hype.
Do you know his story, like from high school?
No. And so, I mean, maybe there's more to it. I don't know.
So this guy never started a high school football game at quarterback. He was a preferred walk-on, essentially. His like a quarterback coach, essentially, like hit up Eric Morris, Eric Morris is the guy that discovered Cam Ward. And so this is a guy that's taken a 0-star quarterback and turned him into a first-round pick, essentially. So it's not like, it's nothing. But Maker is one of those like other crazy, like, again, never started a high school game. The starting quarterback for the school that he went to, Maker's from Austin, so he's from a school called Vandergrift. Vandergrift had a guy named, I think, is it Deuce Bailey? Maybe he was at Louisville, and now I think maybe he's at Wisconsin or something. But he started in high school, and Maker didn't start at all. And then he goes to North Texas, sits on the bench for a year, has a big bowl game, and then has last year where he goes crazy. All that to say, I think one, if he is going to hit as a C2C or Devy asset, it's probably like it took Ward 5 or 6 years in college to eventually go on and be the first pick in the NFL draft. I think the same for Maker. There's a lot to work on. When he faced tougher competition at North Texas, whether it was a P4 program or USF, he struggled.
Yeah.
Like he's got tools for sure, but he struggled when he faced tougher competition. And so I'm not saying that the Big 12's tougher competition necessarily, but I do think when we're talking about a top 3 Devy asset, I think that is going a little far. And if his value keeps rising like that, I would absolutely try to trade him for Darren Mensah, who's going to go put up crazy numbers at Miami.
And has already proven it at a P4 level.
Yeah. And he might get some first-round buzz this year or next year in the NFL draft.
And I mean, I'm not trying to – I know you're not trying to compliment Cam Ward or anything, but Cam was always pushing the ball down the field and being a little bit braver with the ball than anything Maker's done. And maybe you can excuse it away with, he's never played football. Or he was Frank says he was a punter. So, like that's pretty wild. I love the story.
Starting safety in high school, yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. So I love the story, and that does give me some context, but I still feel like I'm selling if I can.
Totally.
But Josh, I also wanted, I'm picking your brain tonight, but I also wanted to know, Jordan Dwyer is considered like a top 10, at the very least, a top 20 wide receiver in CFF right now. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case. And I want nothing to do with him. In fact, if anything, you just gave us the Pafeli-Ashlock arbitrage. I'm giving you the Jordan Dwyer arbitrage, and it's a guy that I brought up in the offseason, an Alabama State wide receiver who transferred over in Jeremy Scott, 6'3", 200 pounds. He's projected to be the starting Z wide receiver for TCU. Now, I have no idea if Jaden Craig is anything, because I don't even have him in Devy Beth. I have no idea where he came from. Maybe that's my fault, but I have no idea who Jaden Craig is. I have no idea if he'll be good. But if he's anything that can get the ball to the receivers, I would almost rather have Jeremy Scott, especially at his price, than Jordan Dwyer.
Well, and they also got, they have other wide receivers in that receiving core that are really, really talented. I have 0 shares of Jordan Dwyer, and I've done more CFF drafts than anybody else this year. I probably have 25 under my belt at this point. So you are talking to somebody who is right here with you, lockstep on.
Let's go.
I am not on the Jordan Dwyer bandwagon just because of the question mark that you've already talked about.
A fifth-year player that's never surpassed 800 yards receiving. Like, why are we overly excited about this? But I guess back to 50 Shades team. I think they're right. They haven't done the supplemental yet. You obviously need wide receiver help, especially if we're sitting here talking bad about Jordan Dwyer. Amari Miller is probably underrated. I like that one. Bo Sparks, decent CFF option, but you definitely need some help there. I think you need to go hit your supplemental hard, whether that means, doing the Aaron Wilcox approach and trading up and doing things like go get the studs in this draft in the supplemental. Don't wait. Don't be complacent, because that's how you just sit there and go, oh, well, now I have this guy who's going to sit on my roster as a roster clogger for the next 5 years. Go get the players that have already made huge news in spring and things like that, because your team is not that far off.
Yeah, I do like that advice. And but speaking of guys who've made news in the spring or lack thereof, I am similar. I had similar feelings to yourself, John, about Jeremy Scott, like transferring into TCU. If you can send me like any piece of buzz on him whatsoever, I want to hear it, because been searching and there's been nothing. So until I hear something, promising, I guess I'm not going to have any shares just because it's too speculative without any hype. Because when a guy transfers in, you want to hear some promising spring reports. Is he actually practicing? What is the case? So, but it is a good shout out, like as a deep sleeper type of guy. And in the context of what we're talking about there in that wide receiver room at TCU and Dwyer. So next up, well, in the chat here, I mean, DFF Frank is here, and he submitted a team for us to break down. So I'm excited to get to that. Let's start with the strong quarterback room, and that's Arch Manning. We got Mestamaker there as well. C.J. Bailey. We got Heinschall for Pitt. John Mateer for Oklahoma. Gunnar Stockton for Georgia. So got some guys at the P4 level, higher end schools. He's at Longstreet, now ending up from USC at LSU. So another guy who could step up there in future years too. And then going to the running back position, Josh already shouted out Dendy, who's going to be like a G6, CFF, workhorse potentially this year. And then we still have, let's see, I got to sift through some guys here who have gone on to the NFL level, but we have Kendrick Raphael, Nate Shepard, Mekhi Hughes again, Kobe Martin, I assume, for Indiana. So that could be an interesting one this season. And unfortunately, Bryson Washington, who just, I guess I'm really hoping that something happens there. It's not looking good, right? His spring game was very inefficient for Auburn. There's been no hype. He really flamed out there this last year due to injury at Baylor. I don't love it. And then Frank is also in the chat as we're breaking down the team. He won last year with that team. So very nice work being able to win with that roster. Good roster so far, but let's keep going to the wide receiver position because he had Mekhi Lemon. He had a couple other higher end guys, Emmett Johnson for CFF purposes. But now at the wide receiver position, another Pofele Ashlock, Cooper Barcade, Ashton Bethel Roman. Let's see. Satenga is back for Oklahoma. I think that could be a solid play for CFF purposes. Quincy Porter, I don't know if he's going to do anything transferring over to Notre Dame, but former, borderline 5-star guy at Ohio State. Parking Livingstone, same idea. I don't know if he's going to do anything at transferring from Texas to Oklahoma.
Hey, don't skip over Ian Strong and Griffin Wilde. Don't do
it. I like Ian Strong. Yeah.
Yes.
No Ian Strong disrespect.
Braylon Staley too. I'll throw his name into the mix.
Who's that?
And Emmett Mosley. Like he has some wide receivers, man. It might not be like the absolute sexy Jeremiah Smith and whatever, but he has some solid wide receivers.
For sure.
And you skipped right over Jeremiah Coger too.
I was coming back to him.
Gosh, I knew there was something I liked about you, Andy. Oh, Jeremiah Coger. My heart.
All you guys jumping on me here. I'm coming back for some of those guys. But no, you guys covered the big names there. And then even Hernandez too, like as a CFF option, Colger, yeah, absolutely. And then at the tight end position, kind of losing some guys there. So it needs to rebuild it. But what are your guys' thoughts initially? Whoever wants to jump in first on this roster. Again, I like the quarterback position, very strong. This team obviously won last year, has some rebuilding to do as it loses quite a bit of firepower from that running back, wide receiver, and tight end room.
I'm going to give Josh a break on this one because he started off on all the other ones, and I feel like starting off with a C2C question is always difficult because there's so much to break down. So I'm taking it away here. First of all, sell Drew Mestamaker. That's rule number one this offseason. So sell Mestamaker. No, I mean congrats on the championship first and foremost, Frank. And the great thing is it doesn't seem like you've actually lost that much from your roster, which is awesome. And you're still going into the supplemental, so you still have a lot to work with there. Hopefully you have picks. Maybe you don't. I don't see picks here, so I have no idea. You have a hell of a lot of wide receivers to work with, even though maybe you don't have the top tier guys. You have so much depth and everything that I don't think it's that much of an issue. I'm focusing on those running backs. Nate Shepard is one of my favorite players, but we have no idea exactly what Duke is going to be this year. Bryson Washington is somebody that we're hoping for, like Aaron was saying. We hope they can take a step forward. I'm very concerned about Kendrick Raphael. transferring over to SMU, and in fact, there's a player, and I'm trying to remember his name. We're giving away all the secrets tonight. If I can remember his damn name, I will give it to you. Is it Derek McFall? Is actually another player that transferred over, or actually he was with SMU already. 8.8% big time run rate, and you bring over Kendrick Raphael and is like 5.6%, can't break a freaking tackle, and it doesn't really scare me. And so like technically Raphael is the starter, but I don't know if it's going to end up that way. And if you go look at McFall's numbers and what he did, it's actually kind of exciting. Now he's only 183 pounds, so I don't know that I can get excited about like truly like Devy purposes or anything like that. But for CFF purposes, that might be somebody that you want to try and add really late just to have on your squad because you already have Raphael just to be safe. But yeah, that's a player that I'm excited about. But yeah, I think it's the running backs that we really have to focus on here because, you also lost a lot of tight ends. Obviously, most people are generally weak at tight end. That's not the end of the world. But I would focus on tight end and running back in your supplemental there. And I think you'll actually be okay when it's all said and done. Obviously, having Arch, having Hussein Longstreet is somebody that I'm getting even more excited about. I was already excited about him, but hearing everything we've heard this offseason and everything makes me truly believe if he doesn't actually do it this year, he's going to be there. He's going to be the guy next year. John Mateer, people are kind of getting back in love, falling back in love with them. I don't know that I can do that. Andy was his biggest proponent. I don't even think he's doing that. So he can tell you here in a second. So I don't want to be that guy, but you have enough where I think you're going to be okay. Once again, you gotta crush a supplemental, and you could probably repeat here.
Yeah, running back is obviously what needs to be retooled the most. You're losing Jamari Taylor, Katron Allen, Emmett Johnson, Chip Tranum. Like that was probably the majority of your between Emmett Johnson, Jamari Taylor, and Chip Tranum. Like that's a lot of points that you're losing. And I just don't know that like Nate Shepard and Kendrick Raphael, Dendy and Kobe Martin and Bryson Washington are going to be able to, and Mekhi Hughes, like some of those guys might hit, but certainly not all of them. So I feel like that's where I would focus if you're looking to like retool and go back for back-to-back championship. Because I really don't have any notes on the wide receivers. I think there's a lot of depth there. I think there's a lot of talent like that could potentially transfer into NFL talent. I like Cooper Barkate. He's an FCS guy. Played at an Ivy League school, but he had offers from a lot of P4 schools coming into school that he just chose not to go to. And then he obviously has that connection with Mensa from Duke last year, and they're both going to be playing at Miami. I think that duo is going to go off in 2026. So I don't really have anything negative to say about the wide receivers or the quarterbacks for that matter. You got Arch, Mestamaker. Like you're going to score enough points there. And then the tight ends, yeah, I just think, this is a team that probably needs DJ Vonamy or who's the guy from Boston College we like?
Chudzinski.
His name now. Yeah, Chudzinski.
Yeah,
something like that. Just throw in another. Get somebody in the supplemental draft just so you can start somebody in week one, and then maybe you can evaluate waivers from there if that's something that your league does. But aside from that, I think just retool the running backs, and you're good to go again for 2026.
Yeah, I personally, I think this is a great go after some G6 running backs later on in your supplemental draft, and just retool that way.
Who are
Aaron,
the
you can
targets?
talk about
Josh? Who are the targets here? G6 running back, he already has. He has a solid squad basically everywhere else. He's going to go in. He's going to get some of these stud players, but maybe they're going to sit behind other players. So who's he going to get in the 12th round, 13th round that he's going to be like, hey, now I'm able to win again this year?
Yeah, I think it's a Duncan Brune, Mac running backs essentially. CJ Miller, okay. Rodney Nelson, they're kind of guys coming up from FCS, but Duncan Brune, those type of guys that he can get. Antonio Martin coming over from Kansas State to Middle Tennessee. He's reuniting with his coach at the FCS level, where he ran for 1,200 yards at Southeast Louisiana at Middle Tennessee State. High rush share there. So there's some guys like that, like deeper, kind of some deep cuts, if you will, that he can take advantage of. Maybe Telly Johnson's out there from NIU. He's got a coordinator coming in that has a really high rush rate, has given a lot of volume to running backs. So guys like that, I think, would be the obvious one. It looks like maybe he could get, again, I don't know who's on his deal, but he's got so many, Aaron, you can talk about this, but he has so many picks early on that he can load up on Devy assets and then go ham later on in his draft and just go after the G6 and repeat pretty easily.
Yeah, impressive squad. I mean, and the picks, Frank messaged me, and he's got multiple firsts there. I think 4 firsts. It's crazy. And then a second, 2/3, and the rest of the picks for the most part as well. So very much going to be able to rebuild there, try to contend again. Based on the feedback here, solid squad already with what you have remaining there and the firepower to continue building. And so that's how you just build it year after year, capitalize on some guys, acquire some future picks, and build out the Devy talent and also some capability of winning on the college side too. So hopefully the NFL squad can get some injection of nice talent here in the coming years as well, Frank. So thanks for the submission. And last but not least here, friend of the show, unless Josh has any other thoughts.
Real quick, I did want to say Derek McFall actually converted to slot receiver this offseason. So he is no longer a running back at SMU. But Jermeco Green is there, and coaching staff loves him. I do think that him and Raphael will be 1A, 1B. I'm not saying to not draft Raphael because I think they paid a lot of money to get him. And I think NIL matters in that sense. But just be aware that Jermeco Green's there. He's a guy that was a decent supplemental pick last year. And so there you go. No like Derek McFall.
Yeah, like I said, CFF is
Don't
my
do
weakness.
that. Don't do that.
Don't do that, apparently. Man, that actually sucks. Like, he was an exciting player, but
he was. I watched a lot of film of him, and then they just put him as slot receiver.
Too good of a receiving option, right, to stay at the running back position.
Well, no, he actually, I want to say he had like $400 receiving yards, something like that. And that was one of the things that was exciting about him was not only were you going to get rushing, but you were going to get receiving. Now apparently all you're going to get is receiving, so it's not going to work.
Yeah, he felt like the closest thing to the running back that they had a couple years ago. That was from Miami, Smith. Can't remember his first name, but
Brashard Smith, was it?
Brashard Smith, yeah. He felt like the closest thing to him, like converted wide receiver into running back, and so he had that receiving chops. Because McFall did play wide receiver.
Okay. No, I was gonna say Derek McFall is what people want Zachariah Branch to be.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah, and SMU's got this weird thing with running backs too, like Chris Johnson Jr., right, going over to Clemson now, but they didn't really ever utilize him in a high volume role. Same thing with McFall. But yeah, Kendrick Raphael does at least project to get some volume. Whether you want somebody who's not that explosive on your team, hey, that's a different question, different conversation to have, right? So,
For sure.
Well, let's go to the last roster that we're going to break down for tonight, and it's a friend of the show, Felix Sharp here. He was kind enough to send a roster over. He actually sent 2, but I just picked the first one there just to be fair to everybody, and so we don't stay here for 2 hours because I'm sure that we'll have a lot of hopefully kind thoughts here for Felix. But let's go through that roster real quick, and I'll let you guys kind of chime in here as we go. But he does have Darian Mensah, so we got to say some nice things about that. And he'll also have Marcel Reed, who's returning at Texas A&M. Let's see, Josh Hoover, who's going over to Indiana, so that could be kind of a fun season for him. And going to the running back, Dampier is still there at Utah, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then after that, he's going to have to rebuild that quarterback room, but he has some starting options there. Then going over to the running back room, I do like the fact that he has an Isaac Brown, explosive guy there, and he is losing like an Emmett Johnson to the NFL side. But Wayman Jordan, another roster with him. He has Jacoby Williams at Texas Tech. I know Felix does like Jacoby a good amount. Dylan Riley, who I actually like a pretty good amount there at Boise State this season. I think he could go off, especially if there's some injuries there, or he just takes that next step based on what he did last year. Fluff Bothwell, I think another season there, acclimating to the SEC level. He could be very solid. And then, Carson Hansen, we'll see if he actually takes on that lead role or if it's a split backfield at Penn State, but following his coach, that's interesting. And Adam Muhammad, too, going over to Cal, that could be interesting for a nice workload as well. And going to the wide receiver position, I really like a couple of the top end options for CFF. Easton Messer, TJ Moore should have another solid year. If the quarterback position gets figured out there at Clemson, that's a big if. And then, Reed Harris, that if I've ever seen a wide receiver that Felix loves, it's got to be like a Reed Harris, right? Super athletic, tall. I think that he could have a nice year at Arizona State ultimately, and then he loses both the tight ends, so nothing there at the tight end position. Give me some feedback, guys. Thank you, Felix, for sharing this roster too.
Yeah, I think so. This Felix Sharpie guy, whoever he is, that thank you so much for sending it in. We really appreciate you. You can tell he's new to the game, which is fine. We're not trying to downplay anyone here, and we're not trying to put anyone down here. But you can tell he's new to the game, and that's why we're here. But he lost so many players to the NFL, and yet he has so much to refill here, and it's like what are we doing? You got Chip Trainum is like a starter still, and like Robert Henry, I don't know what to do here. TJ Moore is essentially the big name on the team, and we wouldn't even say that TJ Moore is even a huge name anymore. At least not as big of a name as he used to be. Yeah, Josh is giving us some tears. Don't get me wrong, I love TJ Moore, and
he's a Tampa boy. How can we not love him?
Well, that's true. Yeah. Is he? What's that? What's the team or what's the high school that's always pumping him out? I can't think of the damn name right now.
Yeah, I mean there's Armwood.
IMG Academy.
IMG
is
he IMG? Yeah. Okay.
No. I don't think he was.
No.
Yeah, Tampa Catholic or something like that. But
okay, yeah, no, that's definitely he's right down the street. But no, IMG is always pumping him out too. So I always like those boys. But I mean, unfortunately, you've just lost so many players here. It's really tough. I mean, you're in what I would consider a almost full rebuild at this point. But that I'm hoping that means you did well. You have some players like Emmett Johnson, who we don't necessarily love for the NFL, but who was obviously amazing for CFF last year. Fluff, Isaac Brown, who's obviously still around and everything. There's some players, Waymon Jordan. There's some players to work with here. Reed Harris. I know you're a big Reed Harris, Felix, but I tell you what, I'm a big Reed Harris fan as well, and it actually hurts my soul to admit that. But I think that we can say there's definitely some pieces here, but you have a lot of work to do to get this team back to competing.
I mean, that was pretty rude what you did, John. I'll just say that. But the quarterbacks I think are fine, right? Like Devin Dampier is going to be great for CFF. He's got Mensa. Hoover's going to be good for CFF at Indiana. He's going to be throwing the ball a ton. The running backs, I think, they're fine. Like if Dylan Riley can get back to the dynamic player that he was. Obviously, we like Fluff Bothwell and Isaac Brown and Waymon Jordan. Javian Thomas is a guy that we used to love at a time. Maybe he just needed a year to acclimate to UCLA, and now things are going to change, and he's going to – I know Wayne Knight's there, so I'm not hopeful. I'm not sold on Adam Muhammad, honestly. Like it's not like a spicy enough take to really say that often, but I don't think Adam Muhammad is just like the heir apparent to Kendrick Raphael at Cal. I think there's a couple guys. There's actually a guy coming in from FCS, Carter Vargas, that I really liked.
Dude, Carter Vargas is an athlete, bro.
Okay, see?
He's 210 pounds, and he does not move like that. He looks 190 on film. Anyways, I like
right.
Adam Muhammad, but Carter Vargas, I'm with you on that. Whatever you say next, I agree with. So go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
I didn't think I was going to go on a Carter Vargas. I have some notes on him from when I did the FCS stuff, but when I was looking into him, I was like, even Carter Vargas could take over as RB1 over Adam Muhammad, who I really didn't think showed all that much when he was at Washington to just say he's going to walk on campus and be the starting running back. I'll be interested. I feel vindicated now that Josh has said Carter Vargas is legit, so that's good to know.
Look, this is a high IQ outfit, man. We're talking UC Davis. Like, we got it all here. I'm with you, Andy. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. But to get back to Felix's team, like beyond that, like DJ Moore is his only wide receiver that I can really say anything about. I think everyone else has either moved on or, Easton Messer's there. And then, he doesn't even have a tight end. So it's definitely a rebuilding year for Felix. But maybe he needs to go out and add Carter Vargas and a few other guys, and he'll be back on track. Let me read what I had on. Hold on, let me see what I had on Carter Vargas, because I got my
We're diving
Kendrick
deep
Raphael.
tonight, baby.
So I said, like, Adam Muhammad's already been crowned as the RB1, but yeah, because his big time run rate was like right at 7.5%, huge, like, as a receiver. He didn't get a lot of volume. Was it UC Davis that he played for?
Yeah.
Yes, but like when he touched the ball, it was explosive. Like over 2.5 breakaway yards per attempt, over 2.5 yards per route run as a receiver, which speaks to him being like a stellar athlete. Like he's busting big plays when he gets the ball. So, yeah, let me get Carter Vargas as the RB1 at Cal. I'm planting the flag right now. Now I feel empowered to do so.
Hey, clip this, save it for week 4 of the seaon. I will say it was when I looked up Carter Vargas, and I went down a hole deep. I clearly went down a rabbit hole on him, but it was mystifying that he didn't get more production at UC Davis. And then you see the clips, even at Cal, like go watch, they'll have some clips of him in some of their hype up videos, and he just looks awesome. And it's like, but then everything out of camp is Adam Muhammad is a bell cow, like he's going to be the guy, like they're talking him up. But I'm with you. Like, look, I like Adam Muhammad, don't get me wrong, but I like him because Kendrick Raphael ran for 4 yards a carry and had like 13 touchdowns, and they never benched him. So I don't know. I mean, do they even want an explosive running back at Cal? Like, I think that could be debated. I mean, look, he could just be the next Kendrick. But look, if you wanted to grab Carter Vargas later because you also have Adam Muhammad on your roster, like, I'm for that. I do think what's like sharp is, I mean, like Felix is one of the best in the game. He can turn around any roster. He's no Aaron Wilcox, but a close high to the most high, possibly. But look, wide receiver position is just a tough one to turn around. I would say in supplemental drafts. I mean, you gotta like look, like maybe you hit on a Danny Scudero, but like as many Danny Scuderos as we hit, we miss on those guys too. So like you're gonna have to have some guys you're gonna have to shoot for the stars on and potentially hit. And like maybe a Ray Joseph. I know a has been at Miami who went over to ECU, reconnecting with his quarterback. The OC there is Jordan Davis, who's at UNT. We saw what he did with Wyatt Young in the slot this last year. Maybe he does that with Ray Joseph or Brock Spalding. You can try to hit on a guy there. Again, Audric Harris, potentially at Hawaii. But you're going to have to hit on some, like, again, deep cut guys that are they're going to be risky. You're going to miss on half of them. And, hopefully you get the right ones. So that would be, I think the toughest thing about a rebuild on your roster, because Felix can, again, he can make magic out of really anything, but wide receivers are always tough to replace year in and year out, in my opinion.
Josh, I know you're new here, but we're not nice to Felix here. So,
shoot.
My
bad.
I'm gonna need you to calm down there.
Did I
buddy.
tell you about this time that I met Felix and then I forgot that I met him and he reminded me of it on X? It was great. I can't wait to see him here in Austin. I won't forget the second time I meet you.
Very forgettable person, but no, seriously, Felix. In you're only your second year in C2C. You're doing a great job. Don't give up here. Aaron, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking you guys, we're having a lot of fun here, Felix. So I appreciate you. I will say though, I actually think that the wide receiver position in supplementals is it's somewhat deep, but I'm not going to say it's high end. Like Josh was saying, it's like good luck trying to find like a Scudero or somebody who gives you like that high end wide receiver numbers. I think you get a lot of like wide receiver 3 type of production, wide receiver 4, like startable, passable guys to kind of build off of. So you can pair them, in that flex spot or filling in that wide receiver spot with an Easton Messer, a TJ Moore, Reed Harris, hoping that those guys stay healthy. But we just know things happen in the C2C, CFF format, Devy, etc. to these guys in college. Like we just hear about guys getting dismissed from the teams, guys getting severe injuries they never come back from, all sorts of different reasons off the field, gambling nowadays, like betting, we've seen that crop up this off season. So I just think at the end of the day, if you only have like 3 guys and you're banking on them staying healthy the whole season, that's really hard. But again, you can build it out. And the nice thing too is if you are committed to the grind and like, I'm going to really compete this year, you draft that way in your supplementals and you trade that way up until the deadline, or maybe you don't have a deadline. I think it's honestly better the leagues that don't have deadlines personally. I will always advocate for that, but that's a debate for a different day. But those just in general leagues where there's some trading, some activity there, try to make some moves, because by the time you get close to the playoffs, 6 teams are in, 6 teams are out, or maybe even more teams are out depending on how many teams advance within your league to playoffs. And there's going to be teams trying to offload those CFF only options. So if you can just survive, like stay above water, stay in that playoff race, you can always acquire some guys close to that deadline or close to playoff time if you really think you can make that push. So you can kind of straddle that line, see how the first few weeks or first half of the season goes on the college side.
I like it. Hopefully that everyone appreciated the analysis that we gave them. That was fantastic. I think we helped. Obviously, it'll help even more. Like we got context with Frank. Like he had 4 firsts and things like that. That's great context, because then not only did you just win, not only do you have a pretty solid team, but then you have multiple firsts, multiple seconds, whatever it was to be able to work with. In the future, we should probably get that information for the rest of the squads as well. Just so that we know, hey, what are you working with here? Even Felix, even though we're having fun here, he probably did pretty well with that roster. Tommy Castellanos, Josh Hoover, Darian Mensah as his QBs on top of Dampier and Navarro, and then all the players that he lost, beyond that. So he probably did pretty well if he didn't, truly compete with that team. And maybe that's why he's rebuilding, like in almost like a full rebuild now, because he went in and tried to win it all, or did win it all. We don't know if he did or not. So, we appreciate everyone sending in their rosters and taking the time to listen and join us in the chat and here and everything. But I completely fell flat on my face with my Derek McFall. I McFalled on my face. So Josh, I need to redeem myself here. I got the what's it called? The rip something?
I don't know.
Rim shot, or whatever the hell it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. But I have another running back, and I need validation on this one. Okay, I need some CFF validation on this one. If I don't get this one, I'm probably quitting everything. No. Marcellus Hawkins, Virginia Tech. Any love?
I mean, he's a guy that I looked at this offseason, and all the advanced metrics say he's awesome.
Okay.
So he's a guy that I would take a shot on, definitely, in C2C Devy. I mean, because again, like everything about him, I mean, he's what, 212. I mean, again, the advanced metrics are like insane on him, and I think at Virginia Tech, I mean, they're gonna run the ball, but I am curious. He's a guy that I'm watching and looking at, and I haven't had a ton of him in, to be honest, in CFF. That's just because like Virginia Tech just hasn't been great in general running the ball. But
here's the crazy part about Marcellus Hawkins. He had 118 rushing attempts. He had 749 rushing yards last year. He had one touchdown, one rushing touchdown. That is not normal. Now, he's like almost 220 pounds, so this is not like a guy who can't be on a goal line back or anything like that. Why didn't he get those rushing touchdowns? Oh, wait, Kyron Drones took all the rushing touchdowns, and Kyron Drones is no longer there. So now, we have a completely new. Terrion Stewart was also there, and as far as I know, Terrion Stewart is no longer there. Marcellus Hawkins is projected to be the RB1 on this offense. He already was efficient as hell. He was the most efficient running back on the team who didn't only have 3 rushing attempts. And so he was efficient. He had a okay receiving profile. I mean, I'm not talking about him for Devy, I'm talking about for CFF. So that I don't care about. But Kyron Jones had 170 rushing attempts and 9 rushing touchdowns. Imagine if we just give some of those to Marcellus, like those attempts and touchdowns to Marcellus Hawkins. I think this could be a steal, and it's a player that I'm going to heavily target in supplementals. And Aaron is excited to talk about this or to tell me I'm an idiot. One of the two.
It's always one of the two. No, I mean, I actually drafted Marcellus Hawkins in the 13th round of an early supplemental C2C draft this offseason. So I was able, you can grab him late in drafts and take a shot. He's just been injured in the spring, so that's kind of the issue, right? He has not been running with the new coaching staff and whatnot. So, it's just a matter of will they trust him, because obviously there are some promising things with his profile. So that's a good shout out there.
He's a senior, so this isn't a Devy thing. This is strictly CFF. This is not someone I'm saying like, oh, go
could be a
crazy
Devy thing.
for him.
Could be a Devy.
Could be. He is Devy. He's Devy best running back 54.
Okay.
Overall.
Yeah.
So like early day 3 type of.
Something like that. I mean, it's not anyone I'd be amazed by, but I mean, he could easily be your next Emmett Johnson.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. Somebody also had a question here in the chat about DJ Scott, who's
I saw that. I wanted to bring that up. Thank you for bringing it back up.
Yeah, he's supposed to be the running back at North Dakota State. I mean, truth be told, quite frankly, I haven't watched a ton of his film. But I mean, look, for CFF, if you're gonna be the starter at North Dakota State, you're gonna be a decent option. You're gonna have a high floor. I don't know about DJ Scott's ceiling. The stuff that I've looked at, hasn't been oh, I need to go prioritize this guy. Mm-hmm. But honestly, I'm kind of curious to see. I'm ready for Phil Still's magazine to come out to help me sort out some of these depth charts, and North Dakota State's one of them that I'm going to be looking at to see who are going to be the guys.
Is that something that you take to heart? Because I feel like Andy and I, at the very least, have kind of picked apart the Phil Steele magazines and stuff in the past. We've had some fun with that.
Only the depth charts. And it's because he talks to each of the coaches from every FBS program. He talks to them, and then he writes his depth charts up. So, look, he was a guy that we talked about Danny Scudero earlier. He was a guy that had him as predicted as second team All Mountain West Conference when nobody else was on him.
Wow.
And so he just tends to get depth charts right. And I think you have to know, right? This is a little bit of deep research. You have to know which coaches are going to be honest and truthful with Phil Steele and give him actual information and who's not. But man, I found that to be a cheat code where a lot of other people dismiss Phil Steele and his depth charts. I found his depth charts to actually be pretty stinking accurate. He helps me where I'm unsure, because especially at the G6 level where you just don't have almost any information, it's hard to gather. And I prioritize them more at that level than I do at schools where, look, I can go get as much information almost as he can just from reading reports and stuff from most P4 programs.
Andy, I'm not wrong here. Like, we've definitely gone after Phil Steele in some of his takes before, but not necessarily his depth charts.
No. And we did it 1 year. Like, I think it was like the first year we did like full tilt Devy. And I don't remember being like too harsh against Phil Steele. Like, the guy's kind of a legend. He's been putting out that his preview for like how many years. So
yeah.
And I think depth charts are some of the most valuable information. Like, our lads, I've been kind of disappointed with them in the last
so
few
bad
years.
right now. I'm sorry, our lads. I don't mean to bust on you.
No,
I know.
They're just not as good as they have been.
So 100%. The reason why I even brought up McFall is because I was tweaking some stuff in Devy Beth, just making sure everything was good and everything, and then I went to our lads and they had McFall as the second running back on the thing. It did not say slot receiver, it said RB2 behind Raphael, and I'm like, well, I like McFall better than I like Raphael, and so that's why I even brought him up. So 100%, we should give our. I feel like it. I mean, maybe it's just in the NIL era, it's more difficult, and we should give them some grace. But at the same time, I feel like they have fallen off to an extent.
There's a new
And to be
site
fair, he's still running back on the roster.
Yeah, because I was going to say the new site that I use, cfbdepth.com, way more information on there. They give you like stats from the previous year. They have all the transfers like in real time, which, it's still not updated. Like, they still haven't like given us what the depth chart's going to be, but the players are at least accurate. And McFall does still show up as a running back there too. So that's why maybe this is another endorsement for Phil Steele, because you're getting like the current depth charts once that magazine drops, which that's valuable.
Yeah, CFB depth is great. Like, those guys over there are killing it. So
Nice.
the stuff that they're doing is really, really good. I like their depth charts, especially when they get them updated, which they do later in the offseason. Derek McFall, though, just real quick, I got that information from Billy Embody from SMU. He's their on-3 beat writer. And so he's mentioned it several times this offseason, but it's not official on the actual website or anything like that. It's just kind of known that he's working with the wide receivers. He could go back to the running backs, but probably not.
Hey, Josh, this is why we brought you on, buddy. No, all right, Aaron. Obviously, we're going to give Josh his due. So, you kind of took a step back. Did the hosting for the most part tonight. So, any final words on the rosters we said, on CFF, on C2C, or anything else you're feeling?
Yeah, no final words there. I think I got in some of the points where you can, certainly wait a while into the season, even just to see how your squad is performing and go one way or another. Sell to competing teams if you're not going to make it or don't think you're going to go far, or vice versa. If you think, what, I'm doing really well, picked up some guys off waivers, I can compete, reach out to people, make it happen. Hopefully your leagues are active. Hopefully people are trading. Most people who play in this format are pretty active, pretty gung-ho about it. So certainly, yeah, that's a great way to try to operate and make some moves as the season goes on.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem is, people say that, it's really difficult to get trades done in C2C, and it is true to an extent, but I think it's only if you're really following consensus values. If you start thinking on your own, following someone who you really believe in, whatever it might be, it doesn't get nearly as difficult to make those trades. Like I was saying, Drew Mestamaker's getting to a point where maybe you start making those moves, but I feel like a lot of people, or a lot of people valuing Mestamaker would be like, no, don't trade him. You need him, but you can make some moves that would actually make sense for your roster and your team and everything. And those are the things that will make the difference between you competing annually or not. Because a player like Drew Mestamaker, Byron Brown, whoever might only have a couple more years or a year or so before they even lose their value, and then next thing you know, you don't have anyone to trade. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate that this was a fun pod and everything, but obviously I appreciate Josh coming on, one of our favorite people in the space, but we don't get to do guests enough. So unfortunately, we don't get to talk to you as much as we used to, or as much as I would like to. We skipped over, we completely just, we started hot with the pod, but tell us everything that you're dealing with, doing, and what you're up to right now, so that the listeners know at the very least, and that we can get you out of here.
Yeah, I'm doing all my content over at Fantasy Points. We're about to come out with our projections for all 138 teams now in FBS football. So we'll be cranking those out, probably getting them out next week, actually. And then we'll have a free CFF preseason guide that kind of highlights our top 25 players at each position. That'll come out in June. And that's things we're working on. I got a weekly podcast we put out on Wednesday mornings as well. So I got some Adam Muhammad takes on there that might be interesting after tonight.
That's awesome. And that's the kind of stuff that we don't get nearly enough here on the Devy Devotional, but we need. And that's why we bring Josh on. Obviously, make sure you're following him. Make sure you're checking him out. He was gracious enough to join us tonight, even though he had to move stuff around, had to get permission from the wife and everything. So, we greatly appreciate that. We appreciate you guys listening. I got my Marcellus Hawkins approval from Josh and Aaron. Like, I feel like I'm just riding high. I don't even need to come back next week. Like, I'm sitting pretty for like the next month or so, but I will be back next week. And in fact, we'll all be back except for Josh. I don't think he's going to be here. As much as I would love for him to be, I just don't think he's going to be here. But we will be back, Andy, Aaron, and I, in your ears as soon as possible. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys.